let's introduce our news guest and talk about the environment in which we find ourselves, because the Deputy Leader of the National Party and of the Opposition joins us now to talk about her private member's bill, but also, I guess the political environment that we're finding out there, 10 weeks out from the election, and she joins us now. Nicola, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming on.
Great to be on the show, Michael.
Listen, first of all, can I just compliment you? You're doing a magnificent job as an opposition MP, particularly your rumbling of the wealth tax. I thought that was very, very clever politics, and that you were proven right. Well done.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm a politician. We enjoy the odd compliment and amongst the bar, as you well know.
No, but that interestingly led you to the next revelation that you expect the government to have or remove as part of their election policy, the GST from fresh fruit and vegetables. Now, I'm not going to ask you who your source is because it's obviously pretty good. How confident are you, though, that will occur?
Well, I'm very confident that was the policy decision that the Labour Party had taken. You will have seen in recent days that there's been significant criticism of that approach, and we've highlighted the fact that Grant Robertson, as Finance Minister, has himself been very critical of that as an approach to giving income relief to New Zealanders, stating that most of the benefit would probably go to supermarkets and pointing out a lot of the problems with the scheme. So, the question is, do they back away from it or do they stick to it? My pick is they'll stick to it, but they will do so as a divided team, with Grant Robertson being reluctantly pulled into promoting it because the Prime Minister, Chris Hopkins, is forcing him to do it. They're not a happy bunch over there at the moment, Michael. Oh, I've lost you.
Do you know what it's like when the tide's going out the other way, Nicola? It does get very tense and anxious, and yeah. But can I ask, though, on that issue, do you think they'll go ahead with it now that you've exposed it? Because funny enough, the good thing about it, or the bad thing, depending on which way you look at it, is by suggesting that they're going to do with it, they simply confirm that you were right. By not doing it, then at least they can suggest, she got it wrong. You can't lose this, really, can you?
Look, they could play that game, but if a journalist asked them sincerely, was this going to be your approach and you changed it, if they were telling the truth, they'd have to say yes. Look, I think the point here is that Labour have really backed themselves into a corner. They have spent years now saying, look, all of this extra spending we're doing, it's all entirely necessary. None of it's wasteful. And we've been pointing out patiently, well, actually, you're taxing New Zealanders more and more. They're up against it. You've got a cost of living crisis. Your spending is driving inflation. Get it under control. And because they've so resolutely said, no, all the money's being spent perfectly well, no, you can't do income tax cuts, they're terrible, they haven't left themselves with many options. The most direct way to give Kiwis income relief and to let them keep more of what they earn is to give them an income tax reduction. That's National's policy. That's what we'll do. They should do the same.
Okay. Now, yesterday also, the government agreed to the independent arbitrator and they're going to give teachers a 14.4% salary increase over 3 years. I've seen some pretty trenchant criticism of that from what it really means, but it's been costed at $4.4 billion, Nicola. And the really interesting bit of my antennae that pricked up was, and they're going to have to find those savings for the additional funding from within the education sector. And I thought, will you, as the National Party, honour that agreement?
We will, but you have to see this for what it is, which is that it is the ultimate result of a government that has let the cost of living crisis spin completely out of control. Teachers, like nurses, like every other worker, have been pummeled by inflation and rising prices, meaning in real terms, their incomes aren't going as far. And this is why a good government stays focused on the economics and the careful fiscal management, because if you don't, inflation gets so out of control that you lose control of things like these pay settlements. And the problem that you've highlighted is a very real one, which is that Grant Robertson is now going to raid not just this year's budget to settle last year's dispute, but he is raiding next year's budget to fund this settlement. And that will directly take funds that would have otherwise gone to the front line of our schools. And that is the direct result of economic mismanagement. It's scandalous, really, that they've managed it all so poorly.
Well, I remember a certain Labor government going out in 1990 handling National Party a whole series of grenades that they didn't handle very well when they came in. This has got the same feel about it, Nicola. I'm also thinking about the emissions trading scheme, the changes now which will not take place until November. That's after the election, but hey, you're going to end up with the cost of living increases to electricity, to diesel, to petrol, and to a variety of other services in New Zealand as a consequence. In a funny sort of way, aren't they, that if you win, they're limiting your financial choices because of the decisions that they're making now?
Michael, I've had some wise heads look me in the eye and say, Nicola, you might think the next few weeks of the campaign are going to be tough. That ain't nothing. You know, if you get to the other side, you are going to find government books full of time bombs, ticking fiscal disasters. It'll be like it's been with previous Labor governments. They've got the money hose, sprayed it all around, they've made a huge mess, and when you get in there, you'll have a huge clean-up job to do. But you know what? We're up for that task. National governments are good at instilling discipline, at managing economies, at making sure that we get our books in order. And I think my sense is that we're up against a bedraggled team that have really let a lot of things go to rack and ruin, and we're going to be doing a lot of tidying up.
Yeah, I guess you're going to open, literally you're going to have to open the books, aren't you? Because you're actually going to, probably prior to Christmas, say, this is the real state of affairs. This is how empty the cupboard is.
That's right, and this is the conversation that's being had in public service circles at the moment. Reportedly, Grant Robertson has very late in the day, after letting the house burn for a couple of years, decided he's going to reach for the savings hose and has summoned public sector chief executives to say, look, I'm running out of money. Can you please find some savings, because I'm going to have to paper over the cracks. Otherwise, when he's forced to open the books on September 12, prior to the election, that's part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that he has to do that, it's going to look so ugly that Labor won't just get elected this time, but won't get elected for many, many terms ahead. So he's doing a last-minute kind of attempt to tidy it all up. Whether or not he can do that is yet to be seen. But thank goodness he does have to open those books.
Yes.
There was a time in our political history where governments tried to hide these things. Well, he shouldn't be able to do that this time.
No, it's a fair point you make. Yeah, that's Ruth Richardson's legacy, and really in lots of ways, and her real legacy is the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Now, which leads on to this next bit. When you get a bit antsy, and if 10 weeks out from an election, you don't like to give any credit at all to the opposition for fear of, basically giving them a leg up. That happened to you this week in terms of a bill that you introduced into Parliament. Can you explain to me what your bill actually intended to do, first of all, Nicola?
Sure. My bill was a very simple, straightforward thing, an amendment to the paid parental leave entitlement that currently exists in law. At the moment, as you'll be aware, parents can take up to 26 weeks of paid leave, but there are some real restrictions on how they can divide that leave between a mum and a dad, or a mum and her partner. And so my bill just sought to give parents in those parental leave situations maximum flexibility, so they can take the leave at the same time if they want, concurrently, or in overlapping instalments. Up to them. It's their leave, divided according to their family circumstance, what they think is best. Give them a choice. Don't let government rules get in the way of families making their own decisions. It wouldn't have cost $1, Michael. Would have been very simple. I've had so many parents write to me and say it would have made a big difference to them and their circumstances, mothers who've had birthing injuries or who have had postnatal depression, who would have loved to be able to have an arrangement with their partner at home for a few weeks. So I was genuinely flabbergasted when Labour MPs got up and started speaking against it. I just thought, what is going on here? This is politics getting in the way of what's right. Incredibly disappointing. And some of the reasons they confected for opposing it, frankly, some of them were pretty insulting.
Yeah, I read some of the remarks that have been reported. I must admit I didn't keep up with the debate. I was at a World Cup game, actually. But one of the things I'll tell you about that on another day. The really interesting thing, though, Nicola, is that their argument was basically mum knows best and mum should stay at home. That was the tenor of the argument. Did I get that right?
Yeah, well, you had the Deputy Prime Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, say yesterday that they didn't want mothers to be able to spend any less time at home by sharing the leave with their partners, because actually the World Health Organisation guidelines are that they should be at home breastfeeding for 6 months. And, that is just the kind of nanny state stuff which it drives the feminist in me wild, because I have got many, many friends and family members who have struggled to breastfeed, number one. Number two, many people who, for a range of reasons, choose not to breastfeed for that whole time. Number three, women who do keep breastfeeding while they return to work. So to have this sort of idea that, the government's just doing what's best for mums here, go back to the 1950s. It's 2023. Women are perfectly well placed to make the decisions that are best for them and their families, and the government shouldn't tell them what to do.
Well, can I also say it's insulting for another reason? I was a single dad, so I raised my 3 children by myself. I find it offensive from the point of view that men are regarded as people who can't possibly nurture either. And in many households, there are arrangements, private arrangements, gosh, and certainly a little progressive place like Wellington, where the male is, it might be regarded as the better nurturer, the better carer, or is more, they're at a particular time in their life that they should be at home, and sharing those responsibilities with their partner. It denies that option too, doesn't it?
Oh, look, you make a really good point, and perhaps this is why this issue does strike such a nerve with me, which is that my husband is an incredible caregiver. He is the heart of our home. We have 4 children, and he's made that very selfless decision to take a bit of a step back in his career so that I can go off on this political journey, and he's the anchor in our home. And so that gendered stereotype that women need to remain at home for a set period of time while men go off into the world, I just think it's completely outdated. And I was, as I say, really surprised to hear Labour MPs in 2023 go down that road.
Now, Chris Hopkins said in response to that also, we don't like what National are doing, but we are going to look at it. Did you get the feeling that he was sort of waving the white flag? The only reason what not doing it is because, you suggested it 10 weeks out from an election.
I just got the feeling that he was embarrassed. He realised, we've been a bit caught out here. That this isn't looking that good. I probably don't want to say too much about this. What can I do to not answer this question? I thought it was evasive. Actually, leadership would have been for him to have told his caucus, look, guys, let's just support it. This is the right thing to do. He abdicated an opportunity to show that leadership, and I don't have much sympathy for him now.
And the other thing is they could have just sent it off, because it could go presumably to a select committee. It was first reading, wasn't it?
Exactly, yes, and select committees are all about, particularly with members' bills, looking at the bill, its implications, whether or not there are any technical things that need to be amended or fixed. And, if they were so worried about it, they could have done all of that exploration at select committee, mounted the case against it, and the election would have happened in between. So really strange approach by Labour, pig-headed and frankly just a bit mean.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but also the political management's all over the place too, Nicola, because here you are talking about it now. You've had a lot of coverage as a consequence of it being denied. There are a number of organisations who are now also speaking publicly, not casting the government in a favourable light. If they just said, yeah, sure, bang, gosh, you would have got 3 lines probably in most newspapers today.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I've been quite overwhelmed, actually, by the number of parents who have reached out to me personally to say thanks for sticking up for us, or have chosen to share their story with me of what happened to them and why they would have liked to have been afforded these choices. And there's, no doubt about it, by taking this approach, Labor's got offside with a lot of people.
And finally, the polls are looking good for you at the moment. Can I just say, Nicola, for those of us on the ground living in rural and in provincial New Zealand, the polls now, as they're showing, reflect now, are no surprise to us. We've felt that for 6 months, and we've been sort of waiting for the wave to come out of rural and provincial New Zealand and start to hit metropolitan New Zealand. And do you get the feeling that that's the way it's working?
I do really sense a feeling of a tide turning in the electorate. I do a lot of door knocking, and I think that people are often the most honest and most personal on their own doorstep. And when I've been having those conversations over the last few weeks, the phrase that keeps coming up with even the undecided voters, there's a group of people who just say, yep, national all the way, please get yourselves elected. If you don't, I'm going to have to go to Australia. But there's another group who they say, look, I haven't quite decided who I'm voting for yet. And then they say, but definitely not Labor this time. And what I take from that is that there is quite a large group of voters in New Zealand now who know that this current bunch don't have what it takes to get New Zealand out of its current crevasse. They know that this current government doesn't have the skills needed to address our current challenges. They're looking for a change in leadership, and they just need to see the National Party continuing to demonstrate that we've got what it takes, and they'll give us their vote. We've got to earn it, and we've got to keep earning it every day. But my sense is, yes, the momentum is with us.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Nicola. We'll follow your campaign with interest. Best of luck. Oh, which reminds me, you're standing for a seat yourself. Which one's that?
I am. I'm standing in the Ohariu seat, which is in the north of Wellington. So Johnsonville, Tawa, Kandala, Wadestown, Nio, Churton Park, Crofton Downs. Great part of Wellington. There's a lot of people there who are hard-working families, good community members, just trying to get ahead, completely pummeled by the cost of living and big mortgages, fed up with a government that talks big, doesn't actually deliver anything for them when it comes to infrastructure or increased health services. And look, I'm hopeful that by telling them about National's plans, we'll earn their support.
You're actually up against Greg O'Connor, the former head of the New Zealand Police Association. I was just thinking about that, who isn't on the list, so if he loses, he's gone. He actually probably doesn't belong in that party because he's much more conservative, and he obviously has been assumed no leadership roles despite his background experience in the police. Do you feel a bit sorry for him?
Well, he has been overlooked for that police minister role several times.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a position which has famously rolled over several times under Labor. Look, there's lots I could say, Michael, but I've made this commitment to myself and to the electorate. Don't criticise your opponent. There's no need for that. I'll just put my best foot forward and he'll put his, and the voters will decide. Okay,
good on you, Nicola, and best of luck. Thank you very much for joining us. Nice to catch up with you again.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, that is the Deputy Leader of the National Party, their finance spokesman, and their candidate for Ohariu. Yes, Ohariu is fascinating. It was the seat that was held by Peter Dunn for yonks, him with the bouffant hairdo. Quite a savvy political operator at the end of the day, Peter Dunn, but he actually threatened to sue me for defamation once. I remember that because I suggested his actions were venal, but it doesn't matter. I can tell you about that on another day. But Greg O'Connor, the former head of the New Zealand Police Association, I said, is the Labor candidate there and got elected. And I think everybody thought would be on the fast track to cabinet because of his public sector experience and because, well, frankly, in any cabinet, you need balance of both sort of conservative and liberal, if you like. And you like to have that, and he was that sort of conservative balance. Got nowhere near it. I think he's deputy speaker or something like that. I mean, yeah. He's not on the list. Well, they wouldn't. They don't like him. So he chose not to go on the list because he would have ended up last. So yeah, there's so many seats that we can watch on election night because that will also be gripping as well as the final result, which I think will probably be well and truly signalled before the day. So many electorates in which you reside, your local Member of Parliament, are going to produce some very interesting results as well, and have a great effect on Labour's list. Because if, let's just say, Greg O'Connor won Oharu, well, that's one more Labour list MP who loses their job. So the irony is that you're in a funny sort of situation at the moment if you're a Labour MP, that you actually want a lot of your colleagues to lose their constituency seats. You hope they've done a crap job as your local MP in the last 3 years so that you can at least get elected on the list. It's a bizarre situation. You'll never see it played out in public. Oh, God, you might actually, given certain instabilities at the moment. But, that Labour caucus, honestly, it is going to be a massive insecurities and upsets and anxieties at the moment.